Hey guys, welcome back. Very sorry that it has been a long time in between uploads. Like everyone else, life's been a bit crazy at the moment with the current situation and whatnot. So I do apologise, but regardless, we're back. And this time around, I'm going to actually detail the process that I actually go through to edit some photos to really just add a bit more life into photos. Perhaps you've taken photos before, you've got your photos archived, and you're looking back at it and you're like, oh, I wish I could do something with it. And this is something that I do all the time. And I just thought it might be a fun idea to just detail this process. So basically, before we get into the tutorial, what I might do is just disclose some of the equipment that I use. So I don't use anything fancy. In my opinion, the best camera that you can get your hands on is the camera that you already own. So whether that be a smartphone, whether that be a DSLR, whether that be a pocket camera, all individual preference. It does not really matter in my opinion. One of the things I will disclose is I do enjoy taking raw photos. That is simply because it just gives you a little bit more flexibility in editing. So you just have a little bit more control. Because of course they're uncompressed files, you just have a bit more freedom to move when you're editing. And also I do use the Lightroom app, and so basically if you have an Adobe subscription, you can access this. I use the mobile version on my iPad Air, and I do use the Apple Pencil. So all that aside, let's get the application fired up and let's get this tutorial kicked off. So we'll just open Lightroom, and so this is a photo that I took a few weeks ago, and basically it's of water just rippling basically, and I think the photo has got potential. It's not the best, but the fun thing about photography is obviously taking photos and then seeing what you can make with it. I think that's the real fun part, but individual preference. So generally the first thing I'll do is I'll get the raw photo into Lightroom that we can see here. Then what I like to play around with is just the light settings. So the exposure, the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, the whites and the blacks. So basically I like to just tweak around with these sliders, and again it's all very individual preference focused. You don't have to, there's no right or wrong way in my opinion. It's all individual preference. So just playing around with these settings here. And I really like kind of really, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I really like it to look really moody. So I'm a big fan of that. Don't know what it is, water and oceans and stuff. I just love to make it look really moody and mysterious. So we might just bump the exposure just down a smidgen, and there we go. So already you can see that we've just enhanced the photo so much just by tweaking a few little settings there. The next thing I like to play around with is the temperature slider here under color, and this actually enables quite a bit of freedom. Like you can see, if you move it right up to the yellow, it looks absolutely terrible, but particularly for things like water, I think it really does enhance the photo. So what I want to do is I kind of want to bring the temperature of it down a little bit, just to make it look a little bit cooler. And that's really a lot of the things I do with it. Just basically I revolve around that temperature slider. Next up, what I think we might do is we might use this selection tool over here, and this is where the Apple Pencil comes into play. So you can obviously do the select tools in Photoshop on a computer or a laptop, but I personally really enjoy the Apple Pencil and using it because it kind of feels like you're actually interacting with the photo a little bit more. I know that might sound a little bit wanky, but I can't really explain it nonetheless. I just really like to feel like I actually have a bit more control with the photo. And so basically what you can see there is I've highlighted the water, and the reason I've highlighted the water is because I actually want to enhance a few things there. So that's when we go to this effects panel, and we can do things like we can bump up the texture, and I think the texture is probably one of the most interesting sliders. It wasn't around to begin with in Lightroom Mobile. It only came on a few versions ago, but I found it to be really handy, particularly when you're doing like really detailed product photography shots and you just want to highlight a specific area. I found them to be really handy in that regard. I like to really bump the clarity up when it comes to water. So we might just turn that up a bit, and then as for the clarity, I don't want it looking too dark, so we might just leave the clarity there. One of the things I also like to play around with here is the temperature again. So I really want to make this water look a little bit blue, like look a lot bluer, I should say. So I'll bring this down a little bit. That's a little bit too blue and it looks a little bit fake, but regardless, we can fix that. So I'm about done with that one. So if we just want to go back to our select tool, we want to go back to color. Then we're going to bring the color picker here into play. And this is where it is really cool. I really like this. So we can actually have a bit more room to move with the particular shape, the shade of blue that we want to go with. And I kind of want it to be a little bit lighter. I don't really like huge saturation, so I'm going to turn this down just a touch, just to zap it of that really bright blue a bit, but just enough blue to kind of just make it pop a bit more. The luminance, I always just like to play around with this just to see what sort of effects it can really bring out. And I don't quite like it in that position. Normally what else I like to do with these particular photos is I like to play around with the selection tool with the sky and with the background a little bit, but I think given the fact that we only have the water is predominantly the largest thing in the photo, I think that that's what we'll put most of the emphasis on today. Then with the detail as well, there's this really cool feature down here, noise reduction. I do use this a little bit. I tend to just experiment just to see how it turns out. I always just like to throw it in there. And already you can see the differences in the photo just by playing around with a few of those options there. So we've gone from this to this. So it looks 10 times better already, but we're not finished yet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to export this raw photo just as a PNG file, and I'm just going to let that render. And then once that photo is rendered, I'm going to open up, and some people may really just be like, oh my God, Snapseed, why would you use Snapseed? All individual preference, and I personally think Snapseed is a really cool editing app. I don't use Snapseed for everything, obviously with certain tweaks and certain modifications to photos. Lightroom is my ultimate go-to, hands down. But what I really do enjoy about Snapseed is just the lens blur effects. This is just done so much easier in Snapseed than it is in Lightroom, and that is purely why I'm going with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this image in Snapseed, and boom, there we go. And then from there, what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to apply a linear lens blur on these waves that we can see in the foreground. So I don't like a lot of lens blur. I don't like it to the extent that it's really obvious. I just like a little bit of subtlety to it. So what we can do is I'll just move the position of this just down a little bit lower. About there, that looks good. We can see that the blur strength is plus 18. I just brought that down. So as you can see, when you slide it along, you can start to see when you're up in the 70s and 80s, it just looks too artificial. So my best rule of thumb is I like to keep it below 30. So I might just play around with, we might just go 24. And then once we're finished that, you can see that it's just changed the photo in a huge way. Even just adding that simple little thing, it's changed that photo hugely. So we're going to export this now, and then now what we can actually see is we can actually see the differences between the two images. So originally, when we looked at the first photo, it just did not look, it was like, it wasn't terrible, it wasn't great, but would you really just post that on your Instagram? Personally, I wouldn't. It just doesn't really do much. Then you can see that differences that we've gone to with this one, it just looks like there's a lot more going on in it. It looks more attractive to the eye, and even though it was only just a few small steps, it's really illustrative of how you can dramatically change a photo even though you may think it's not that great. So I hope that you found this video engaging. I hope that you've not engaging. I hope that you've found this video informative, and I hope that you've taken a few handy little tips here and there. I like to watch these kind of videos all the time for my own learning. If you have found it beneficial, please give us a like, maybe even subscribe to us as well. I have a lot of fun making these videos, and I'm always happy for any suggestions or feedback, so please feel free to include that below. And I will catch you guys in the next one.